They say the Pacific holds stories older than maps, older than kings, older than the first sails that cut across its endless blue. Stories not written down in books, but carried on the tide, whispered beneath palm leaves, passed from one tongue to the next until they become the very bones of the islands themselves. And among the islands of Kiribati, a scattering of low coral atolls in the middle of the ocean, there is one such story. A story of a giant with hair the color of fire, a giant who loved, and a man who became more than human when she left this world. This is the legend of Auriaria, the red-haired giant. Picture the Pacific, not the postcards, not the resorts, but the real ocean, vast, endless, a horizon that looks like eternity. The islands of Kiribati barely rise above it, narrow strips of sand and palm trees scattered across a blue so deep it feels alive. To live here is to live always with the sea, its hunger, its generosity, its moods. In this fragile, ocean bound world, people told stories to explain why the land itself existed, why the sea could be both friend and enemy, why trees fed them, shaded them, healed them. And into those stories walked giants. Auriaria was one of them, a man taller than the tallest palm, with skin bronzed by the sun and hair that burnt red like the evening sky. Some say he came from Samoa, others that he was born of the islands themselves. Wherever he came from, he stood apart, a figure of immense strength and wild beauty. But Auriaria was not cruel, not a monster. He was a demigod, and he walked among people as both protector and outsider. And then he saw her. Her name was Nei Tituaabine. She was not a giant. She was a woman of the islands, but she carried her own power, not of size, but of spirit. They say her laughter could scatter the shadows. Her eyes reflected the sea itself. Auriaria loved her at once, and Nei Tituaabine, though mortal, returned that love. The islanders whispered about them, a giant and a woman. It seemed impossible, yet love is seldom bound by logic. They lived together in harmony, and in their union the people saw something like balance, the vast strength of a giant softened by the warmth of a woman's heart. But harmony and stories never last forever. For fate saw it that the beautiful Nei Tituaabine grew ill. Some say it was a sickness of the body. Others whisper it was a jealousy of spirits, envious of love that crossed the boundary between mortal and divine. Whatever the cause, she began to fade. The giant could do nothing. His strength could topple trees, lift stones, even wrestle storms, but he could not stop death from creeping into the one he loved. Auriaria watched, powerless, as Nei Tituaabine slipped away. When she died, the island grew silent. The people mourned, but none mourned like the giant. His cries shook the palms. His grief rolled across the ocean like thunder. And then something strange happened. From her body, new life began to grow. From her head sprouted a coconut tree, tall, crowned with fronds, its fruit holding water sweet as memory. From her navel grew an almond tree, rich and nourishing, and from her heels a pandanus tree, its leaves sharp yet useful, woven into mats and shelters. 3 trees, born of her body, rooted in her love. The people whispered. Nei Tituaabine was not gone. She had become the trees themselves, guardian, provider, and goddess. Auriaria fell to his knees. Auriaria fell to his knees. His beloved was no longer flesh, but she would forever feed, shade, and protect his people. Yet this miracle was no comfort to the giant, for though the island had gained a goddess, he had lost the woman he loved. And grief that deep does not fade. It lingers, it burns, it reshapes everything that comes after. They say Auriaria wandered the islands after that, hair blazing in the sun, eyes hollow with sorrow. Some say he went mad, tearing at the sea. Some say he vanished into the horizon, walking until the ocean swallowed him. Others whispered he still walks among the palms, watching over the trees that once were his beloved. But one thing is certain, every coconut that quenches thirst, every almond that feeds a child, every pandanus mat woven for a home, they all carry her memory. And the giant, the red-haired Auriaria, is remembered not for battles, not for rage, but for a love so deep it changed the very shape of the islands. And the giant, the red-haired Auriaria, is remembered not for battles, not for rage, but for a love so deep it changed the very shape of the islands. But legends never stay simple, do they? Some say the story does not end there. Some say Auriaria's grief left scars. Some say the giant's love turned to something darker. They tell us giants are strong. They can break trees, they can move mountains, they can shake the earth. But no giant, Not even one with the hair of fire can hold back grief. Auriaria learned this the hard way. In the days after Nei Tituaabine's death, he stayed close to her grove. The 3 trees rose fast, impossibly fast, as though her spirit rushed to root itself into the earth. The coconut stretched toward the sky. The almond spread its arms wide. The pandanus swayed in the salt breeze. Every leaf seemed to whisper her name. Every fruit seemed to carry her breath. The people came to the grove. They bowed, they prayed, they offered garlands. But Auriaria, he stood apart. For the people, this was a gift, proof their goddess lived them still. For the giant, it was torture. But she was there and not yet there, alive and yet forever gone. And so Auriaria began to change. By day, he wandered the shore, staring at the horizon as if daring the sea to take him. By night, he roared at the stars, calling to gods who did not whisper. He pulled out his red hair until it came out in clumps. He struck the earth with his fist until it cracked. His grief became thunder. His sorrow became storm. Auriaria, Auriaria, the giant who loved. Auriaria, the giant who lost. The island shook beneath his mourning. Some say the grief cursed him. The first curse was solitude. The people who once admired him now kept their distance. He was too fierce, too unpredictable, too dangerous. Mothers pulled their children away when his shadow fell across the village. Fishermen avoided the beaches where his footprints sank deep into the sand. The second curse was silence. The gods he cried out to gave no answer. His voice, once booming, now echoed into nothing. The third curse was memory, for he could not forget, not her laugh, not her touch, not the way her eyes had caught the light of the sea. And now these memories gnawed at him like salt on a wound. Auriaria, the protector. Auriaria, the beloved. Auriaria, the broken. There are darker versions of the tale. They say that in his rage, Auriaria tried to tear up the trees themselves. He wrapped his giant hands around the coconut's trunk and pulled until the veins in his arms stood out like rivers. But the tree would not move. It struck the almond with his fist until bark split and bled sap like tears, but still it stood. The pandanus cut him, its sharp leaves slicing his skin, but he only bled more, red hair matted with redder blood. He could not destroy her. She was beyond his reach, and that broke him further. Other whispers that he left the island, that he strode into the sea, each step sending waves crashing higher and higher, that he vanished beneath the surface, swallowed by depths that had no bottom. But still his shadow lingers. Some fishermen swear that in storms, when lightning paints the horizon, they see a figure wading through the waves, a giant hair ablaze like fire on water. They hear his voice roll with the thunder. They feel his sorrow in the swell of the tide. Auriaria, his name carried on the wind, mourned by the sea. Yet there is another version still, softer, sadder, stranger. They say he did not vanish at all. Instead, he lay down beside the grove. He pressed his giant body into the sand, curled around the trees as if still holding her, and slowly the earth covered him. His hair became the red clay of the island. His breath became the salt wind. His heart, still beating, became the ocean's endless pulse. And the trees, the body of Nei Tituaabine, grew forever with the curve of his embrace, so that the island itself is nothing more than the body of a woman and the grief of a giant, bound together for all time. Which is true? Which is myth? The storytellers do not agree, but they agree on one thing. The red-haired giant loved her beyond reason, and that love changed the world. But legends spread like roots. They twist, they tangle, they lead into new shadows, and in the tangled roots of Auriaria's story, there are darker secrets waiting still. The Pacific is full of blessings. Fish in the nets, rain on the roof, fruit falling sweet from the trees. But ask the old ones and they'll tell you. Every blessing carries a shadow. Every gift has a cost. So it is with Nei Tituaabine's trees. The coconut gave water, the almond gave food, the pandanus gave shelter. To the people, these were gifts beyond measure. They saw her as a goddess who had not abandoned them, but had remade her so that they would never go hungry, never go thirsty, never be without a roof over their heads. But woven into the gift was the shadow of Auriaria, his grief, his rage, his name still whispered with unease. Parents would hush their children when the giant's name was spoken too loudly. Fishermen avoided certain coves at night, where they said his spirit still walked there, dragging the sea with him. And in the rustle of the coconut fronds, in the crack of pandanus leaves, the almonds creak at night. People swore they heard his voice, not words, but a moan, long, low, aching, the cry of a giant who could never let go. Some storytellers say the trees themselves carry warnings. Break open a coconut, and you might find water sweet as life or sour as grief. It depends on whether the giant spirit is near. Strip leaves from the pandanus too carelessly, and you risk cuts that fester, wounds said to be the punishment for disrespecting her body. Even the almond tree, generous as it is, could drop its nuts suddenly in a storm, striking with the weight of anger, blessing, and warning, always both. Over generations, the story of the red-haired giant twisted like roots underground. Some told it was a love story, proof that devotion can outlast death, that from sorrow can grow abundance. Others told it as a caution, a reminder that love too fierce can destroy as much as it creates, that grief unchecked can scar not only a man but an island, a people, an entire world. And some whispered of something darker still, that Auriaria's grief never ended, that he waits in storms and earthquakes in the trembling of the ground, that when the people forget him, when they forget the woman he loved, he will rise, and the sea will rise with him. Stand on a Kiribati beach at dusk, and you might feel it, the air heavy with salt, the palms shifting in the wind, the horizon burning red as the sun falls. And in that red glow, some say, you can see his hair. Auriaria watching, waiting, his love rooted in trees, his sorrow rooted in the earth, his shadow rooted in the sea. What are legends, if not memory pressed into the soil? What are legends, if not memory pressed into the soil? The people of Kiribati do not need books to remember. They have the trees, they have the waves, they have the whisper of a giant's name carried on the wind. Auriaria, who loved a woman named Nei Tituaabine. Auriaria, whose grief became the shape of the islands themselves. And so the legend lives on, a story of love and loss, of blessing and curse, of a giant whose fire hair shadow has never truly faded from the Pacific. The next time you drink from a coconut, or hear the dry song of pandanus leaves, or rest in the shade of an almond tree, ask yourself, is it just fruit, just shade, just the wind, or is it something more? The breath of a goddess, the sorrow of a giant, a story unearthed, waiting for you to listen.